Hello everyone, good morning. Today I'm going to be teaching us how to make a simple pencil skirt that will have a flare at the knee. So this pencil skirt is not going to have, this pencil dress is not going to have a joining at the waist. It's just going to be straight down from the shoulder to the above knee, and then from the above knee there will be a short flare there. But I'm going to teach us how to cut a princess dart that doesn't have any joining at the waist. That's the dart I'll be using for this clothes today. So let's get started. Now this is the fabric I'm going to be using, and I will need the hip, the bust, the waist, the shoulder, both the both the vertical and the horizontal of all these measurements. So because it's not going to have a joining at the waist, I'm going to lay with what is the largest circumference of the body. And the largest circumference of the body, the bust is 42 while the hip is 48. So I'm going to be using 48 to lay it, not 42. So 48 divided by 4, that's going to give me 12. And I'm going to add 1.5 seam allowance to it to make it 13.5. So unfold this way, just measure 13.5. So after laying this way, we need to lay it in the vertical direction. Now the total gown length is 46, while the above knee of the person is 37. So I'm going to be using the above knee. I'll be laying the above knee, while when I want to cut the flare, I'm now going to subtract what the above knee is from the total gown measurement. So 37, but then I'm not just going to use 37 alone. I'll have to add 1 inch to it to join at the shoulder and at the above knee. That will give us 38. So I would mark 38. So this is the point 38. Then I will rule it. I'm going to connect that line together. So the shoulder is 16. 16 divided by 2 is going to give us 8. Then I will add ½ inch to join the sleeves together. Now for the neck width, I'll be using 3.5, while for the neck depth, I would use 5. So then I'll connect it together. I'll make a depression of 3/4 and join it to the neck width. The round sleeve is 15. So in order to get the armhole, after calculation, I'm going to get around 7 1/4. I'm just going to use 7.5. I'll remeasure the shoulder In order to get the rectangular shape we need in drawing or sketching out the armhole. The bust is 42, so 42 divided by 4 will give us 10.5 plus 1.5 seam allowance and 1 inch for joining the princess dart. Now I'm going to measure from where the depression stops to this point and take it down to where the main bust ends. So this is like 10. So that means I'm going to divide 10 by 2. It will give me 5. I'll mark 0.5. That's the point where the princess dart is going to start from. So I'm going to come in by 3/4 of an inch. I'll connect the 3/4 to the tip of where the depression ends. And then from there, I'll make a curve to join it together. So that's that. Now, the shoulder to nipple is 11. While the nipple to nipple is 8. So 8 divided by 2 will give us 4. And then I'll add half to the 4 to give us 4.5. Now I'm going to come up by 3/4 and come down by 3/4. This all depends on the bust of the person you are dealing with. And I will connect this point here to the midpoint of the armhole here. Now, I'm going to measure the underbust, the shoulder to underbust, and shoulder to waist. So the shoulder to the underbust is 14.5. I'm going to use 15, while the waist is 16.5. I'm going to use 17. The hip line, I will use 6 inches, between 6 and 8 inches from the waist. So just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to use 23 for the hip line. So now you measure the same 4.5 on this point too. That's the nipple to nipple plus the seam allowance. And come in by half on this side and then by 1 inch on this side. You do the same at the waist. This is not going to be too curvy, but at the same time you should give your clothes shape. Now I'm going to measure the same 4.5 on the hip and connect this point here to the hip line. You do the same for the other side. So that's that. As you can see, there's no joining at the waist, so that's how we're going to do it. Now let's come back to this side here. I'm just going to go up by half and go down by half, and then connect it to this line here. I'll do the same for the other one, the lower one. Then I'll come out a bit for the lower one, because we're going to cut this out. This is more or less like a dart for the armhole, so that it fits well. I'm going to come out on the lower line here with around, since this is half upwards, half downwards, it's just 1 inch, but I always like to make it excess, then I can trim off. So normally you're just supposed to come out by 1 inch, but I'm going to come out by 1.5. I can always trim it off while sewing. I hope you get that. Then you now make a new curve for your armhole. Now let's come to the hip. We actually laid with the hip, so it's 13.5. Then now let's take the measurements. The under bust is 37, while the waist is 38. So this is the under bust. 37 divided by 4 is going to give me 9.25, plus 1.5 for my seam allowance, 1 inch to join the darts, and finally I'm going to measure what I have here. This is around 1 3/4, so I'm going to measure the 1 3/4, and that is exactly what I have here. So I'm going to be connecting the bust to the under bust. Now to the waistline. The waistline is 38, that is 9.5, plus 1.5 for the seam allowance, and 1 inch to join, and finally also 1 3/4. So that's what I have here. Then the hip, which we used in laying, actually gave us 13.5. That is 48 divided by 4, 12, plus 1.5 seam allowance. Now I'm going to shape in the lower side. Depending on how pencil you want to have it, how fitted you want to have it. So I have 13.5 here. I'm just going to remove from 13.5. If you want it to be reasonably pencil, you just remove about 1 inch. But if you don't want it to be as tight as that, you can remove about 1/2 to 3/4. You can go in as much as 1.5, depending on how fitted you want the dress to be. So I'm simply going to go in by just 1 inch. So instead of 13.5 at the lower edge here, I will use 12.5, and I'm going to connect this 12.5 to the hip line. This is the hip line here. I'm going to connect it together. Now it's time to trim it off. So can you see the way I actually trimmed the dart side? This is the armhole dart, and this is the waist dart, the normal dart over here. And you can see that it's so simple to make this beautiful gown. So you can make your dress without bothering yourself about joining at the waist, and still achieve a very beautiful dart. All right, now so I'm going to use this to cut the back, and because it is stretching, I'm not sure I'll be attaching zip. Is stretching on this side and on this side, so it may be quite difficult to actually insert a zip using a normal machine. So it's not going to have a zipper. So you just lay the front on the back. And then we're going to cut it out. So now let's move it. So now to this point here, I'm just going to come down by 2 inches and then make the neckline of for the back. But there's a major thing we need to note while we are dealing with the back. The back is not supposed to have this curved part that is meant for the bust. So I'm going to remove the front and reshaping this side of the back. So I'm just going to trim off about ½ inch. That's because you don't want the back to have any unnecessary curve that will now make it to look as if there's another bust at the back. So that's why I actually trimmed off this side. I hope that's clear. So this is the back. But if you are working with a cloth that actually is not stretchy, then that means you need to consider the zipper allowance here before putting your front on it. I hope that's clear. Now we're going to cut the flare. The dress length is 46 and the above knee is 37. So 46 minus 37, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 inches. So that 9 inches, I'm just going to add 1 more inch to it to make it 10 because of the hem allowance at the edge and then the seam allowance to join it to the main dress. So that means I need 10 as the length. Now for that lower edge, you know, at the lower edge of the dress, due to the shaping, we had 12.5 left, but in that 12.5 we still need to remove 1.5 as the seam allowance away from there. So 12.5 minus 1.5 is going to give us 11. I hope that's clear. So that means the round, since it is unfold, and it's going to be like 1 2 3 4, like unfold for the front, that's 2, then unfold for the back, that's 2, that makes it 4. So 11 times 4 will give us 44. So it's like the lower edge, the circumference of that edge where we want to bring in the flare is 44. So 44 divided by 6.28, that's what we're going to need. All right, so 44 divided by 6.28 is around 7.00 something. So let's just say it's 7. And because the nature of the material left is kind of small, I'm putting 2 of the fabric on each other this way. You know, normally it's supposed to be unfold this way, but it's open here. So that means it's going to have joining on the 2 sides. So this is it. So this is 2 already. Now I'm going to fold it to make it 4. So instead of the first fold I'm supposed to make this way, I already placed 2 pieces together. So that's 2, and then the second fold this way. I hope that is clear. And that's because the fabric is not enough, as earlier said. And I still want a 360-degree peplum. So now, since I said it's 7 plus 10, which is the length of the flare, is 17. So that means I'm laying 17. So now I've laid 17, and this is 4 unfold, just like the normal peplum. But what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to rule, you know, this side is going to, the sides that is supposed to have joining, so I'm going to rule about half an inch that I will need for the joining before I start measuring. So this side, this the half inch will be used to join it on the 2 sides. So now let's get started. I'm going to put my tape here and measure 7 inches. Round that way. I'll connect the points together. And then from there, I'm going to measure 10 inches downwards from this curved part. So I'm going to keep measuring 10 inches. Then I'm going to join the 10 inches curve together. So you can see I thought was another logic to be able to actually still get your 360-degree peplum even when your fabric cannot cut it straight. So that's that. So I'm going to cut it out now. The reason why the fabric is actually seeming not to be enough is because it's in two pieces. Assuming it's together, it would have been so easy to fix that. This is what we have after cutting. It's still like the normal 360-degree peplum. The only difference is that it's going to have joining on the two sides. So that's that. So now let's quickly cut the sleeve. So I'll be making a bell sleeve. I already have an explanation on how to cut a bell sleeve on my channel. I want to cut the two sleeves together. Now the sleeve length is going to be 11. The total sleeve length will be 17, but I'm going to stop the normal sleeve at 11, while the flare will now be 17 minus 11, that is 6 inches. So I will going to lay about 20 here. So this is 20 inches. Then I'm going to fold. So that's that. Then since it's not so straight, I need to make a straight line here. Then instead of 11, I'll measure 12, half to join to the shoulder and half to join to the flare. And the cap height is 4 inches. I'm going to roll this. And then I'll connect it to the cap height here. I'm just going to do the freehand method. And then the round sleeve at this point here is 14.5. That's divided by 2 will give us 7.25. Plus 1.5 sewing allowance. Now I'm going to connect it to this point here. So I'm going to cut. watch it here. So I'll quickly cut the flare. Okay, so just like we've been cutting different flare, the round sleeve was 14.5 divided by 6.28 was 2.33. So 2.33 plus 6 inches, which is what we have, 17 minus 11, that's going to give us 6. 17 is the total sleeve length, while 11 is where the normal sleeve ends. So 6 plus 2.33 will give us 8.33. So I actually folded this. This is it. I measured it out, 8.33. Can you see that? And I folded it. So this is in 4 pieces. But I want to do it on this side because this side has a cut portion. So I'm going to measure 2.33 round. 2.33. Round that way. And then from there, I'm going to measure the 6 inches. So you keep measuring 6 inches round. And then connect it together. And cut it out. So this brings us to the end of how to cut this particular clothes. I'll be expecting you to watch this and also watch the sewing video, which I will upload shortly after uploading how to sew this. So please ensure you also watch how to sew it. It's very simple and it's easy. I'm simply going to cut one more piece for the other sleeve, and so simple. That brings us to the end of how to cut this particular dress. So for the neckline, since it's a stretchy type, you can either cut an interfacing for it, or you can either cut a facing for it or use your bias. And if it's not a stretchy material, you can line it, but this doesn't need lining. As you can see, it's a stretchy material. Thanks for watching. Bye. See you in my next video on how to sew this.